Imagine, just for a second, that you are sitting in a room.
Okay.
It's quiet. You're completely alone. And you think the space around you is, empty.
Right, just air.
Exactly. But what if I told you that the air between you and the wall is actually crowded? And I don't mean with dust motes or Wi-Fi signals. I mean crowded with entirely other realities.
It's a really claustrophobic thought when you put it like that.
It really is. Imagine that right next to you, occupying the exact same physical space as your chair, is an intersection point for a whole other dimension.
Wow.
And maybe, just maybe, someone is walking through that intersection right now, looking right at you, but you can't see them because your brain literally is not built to process their frequency.
That is deeply unsettling. But honestly, it's also the exact premise of what we are tackling today.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are not just skimming the surface. We are going straight into the deep end of the pool with this one.
Oh, we really are.
We're looking at one very specific night, May 11th, 1966. We are analyzing session 258 of the early sessions, book 6 of the Seth Material.
And this is a heavy hitter of a session. It covers so much ground.
It does. It absolutely does. But really quickly, before we get into the physics of stars and the psychology of ghosts, I have to state this clearly for the record. This podcast will be distributed free of charge on all major platforms for educational purposes.
Always glad we get the housekeeping out of the way first.
Yeah.
Because we have a massive amount to unpack here today.
We really do. So let's set the scene for everyone listening. Why does this specific session matter? It's 1966. Where exactly are we?
Okay, so picture it. It's a Wednesday night, roughly 9 p.m. We are in Elmira, New York.
Right.
We're sitting in the living room of Jane Roberts and her husband, Robert Buttsrob. Now, for the uninitiated, Jane is the medium, though she really hated that word.
She preferred sensitive or just author, right?
Exactly. But she is the one who speaks for the entity known as Seth. And Rob is sitting there with his pen and paper, furiously transcribing every single word she says in shorthand.
And the vibe of this room, it's not some spooky seance, is it? We aren't talking about flickering candles and holding hands in a circle.
Not at all.
Yeah.
There's such a common misconception with this material. This is almost like a laboratory environment for them. It's bright, it's lucid. They are treating this as rigorous research.
But on this particular night, May 11th, the energy is a bit different. It's dense.
Yeah, it is. Because of what happened the night before. This session actually starts with what I like to call a hangover. Not from alcohol, but a knowledge hangover.
I love that term. Explain what you mean by that.
So the previous night, Tuesday, May 10th, Jane had a dream. And this wasn't your standard, I showed up to work in my underwear kind of dream.
Right.
This is a massive cosmic download. She writes in her notes that she saw the universe as an infinity of spirals and stars, and she uses the phrase in depth somehow.
In depth.
Yeah.
She keeps coming back to that specific phrase in her personal notes.
She does. Because in the dream, she had this profound realization. She was either told or she just suddenly knew deeply that, and I'm quoting her directly here, many of our cherished ideas concerning reality are completely wrong.
Which I feel like I have that realization every time I check the news, but she means this on a fundamental physics level.
Right, exactly. Not political, but structural. She wakes up knowing that our entire concept of matter, of time, of space, it's all completely incorrect.
Wow.
But here is the tragedy of it, and I think every listener has felt this at some point. She wakes up, and the knowledge is just gone.
Oh, that is the absolute worst feeling. Waking up from a dream where you solve the universe, and then you go to write it down, and your mind is blank.
It is so frustrating. She's left with the feeling of the revelation, this emotional residue of being incredibly smart and understanding everything, but the actual data, it evaporated the second she opened her eyes.
And Seth, the entity, he addresses this immediately when he comes through the next night, right?
He does. And this is really our first key insight for this deep dive. Seth explains exactly why she forgot it. It wasn't just that she had a bad memory. It was a literal translation error.
A translation error between what and what?
Between the dimension she was occupying during the dream state and the physical brain she has to use when she's awake.
Okay. That makes sense.
Seth says the dream was a multidimensional diagram of reality. But then he drops this line, which I honestly think should be plastered on a billboard for anyone studying philosophy or physics.
What's the quote?
He says, "It is correct to say that the truth can never appear completely undistorted when words are used, for the words themselves almost cloak as much as they reveal."
Words cloak as much as they reveal. That's a pretty dangerous thing to say on a deep dive where we exclusively deal in words. Are we just cloaking reality right now?
In a way, yeah, we are. Think about it. Language is a strictly linear tool. I say one word, then I say the next, then the next. It's like a string of beads.
Yeah, one after the other.
But Seth is saying reality is not a string of beads. It's the whole necklace, plus the neck it's resting on, plus the room the person is standing in, all happening simultaneously.
He calls that the spacious present.
Precisely. In Seth's model of reality, time is simultaneous. Everything is happening now. But our spoken language has a past, a present, and a future tense built into its very structure.
So we literally cannot speak a sentence without chopping reality into tiny type slices.
Exactly. So when Jane tried to pull that all-at-once knowledge from her dream into her one-word-at-a-time waking brain, the data just corrupted. It couldn't fit.
It's like trying to download a massive 4K movie onto a dusty old floppy disk.
Or trying to explain the concept of color to a civilization that only perceives the universe in geometry. You can use metaphors all day long, but you cannot convey the actual experience. The cloak comes down.
Okay, so Seth recognizes this limitation, but he still tries to lift the cloak for us. He starts talking about the stars she saw in that dream.
He does.
And this is where my brain really started to cramp up while reading the source material. We need to walk through this star bombshell very slowly.
Let's do it. It's a big one.
Okay, so basic high school astronomy, I look up at the night sky, I see the star. I'm taught that it's a giant ball of burning gas millions of light years away, fueled by nuclear fusion. Seth says what? Nope.
Well, he doesn't say a flat nope. He essentially says, yes, but you're missing the point. He says that what we perceive as a star is actually a moment point.
A moment point. Define that for us.
So imagine reality is a series of overlapping systems, like layers of an onion, or maybe better, different frequencies on a radio. Seth says that a star is the specific location where another system of reality intersects directly with our own.
An intersection.
Right. He literally says it appears as matter within your system from your viewpoint, but it exists as something entirely different you see within another system.
So the burning gas, the photons hitting my eyes, that is just how our human senses translate that interdimensional intersection.
Exactly. This is a massive, crucial takeaway from the Seth material. Matter is a translation. Seth says our physical senses, our eyes, our ears, our tactile nerves, they are biological machines designed to do one very specific thing.
Which is?
Transform abstract energy data into physical matter patterns.
Okay, help me visualize this. Give me an analogy.
Think of a three-dimensional object casting a shadow on a two-dimensional wall. Let's say it's a sphere casting a shadow. If you are a flat, two-dimensional person living on that wall, you look at that shadow and you see a flat, dark circle.
Right. And I can measure its diameter. I can walk around its edges. To me, it's a totally real physical thing in my world.
But you are missing the sphere that is casting it. You're missing the light source. You're missing the entire concept of the empty space between the sphere and the wall. You're only seeing the lowest possible point of that reality, the footprint.
The footprint.
Yes. Seth implies that stars and planets, and honestly even the chair you are sitting in right now, are just the shadows or footprints of vastly more complex, multidimensional structures. They just happen to intersect our specific world at that point.
That explains why he uses the word projected so deliberately. He says, quote, "The heavenly bodies represent moment points as they are projected into your system."
It implies a highly active process. The universe is not a static stage filled with inert props. It is a live feed. It's being actively beamed in. If the projection stopped, the matter wouldn't just sit there, it would vanish.
Which naturally leads us to the concept of dimensions, because usually when we watch sci-fi movies, a dimension is treated as a place.
Right, like a parallel Earth.
Yeah, you hop into a glowing portal, you travel to the dimension of fire, and it's a physical location on a map.
Seth rejects that Hollywood definition entirely.
How does he define a dimension then?
He says, dimensions merely represent various capacities of consciousness.
Capacities of consciousness. That is such a specific and deliberate choice of words.
It shifts the entire definition from geography to awareness. It means you do not travel to a dimension. You expand into it.
Like the radio dial analogy you mentioned earlier.
Exactly like that. All the radio stations are broadcasting in your room right now. 98.5 FM, 101.1 FM. They're all occupying the exact same physical space. You don't have to drive your car to a different city to hear them. You just have to change your receiver's capacity to pick up the signal.
So if I could somehow turn the dial of my own consciousness, I would see the fourth dimension right here, sitting in my living room.
That is exactly what Seth is claiming. He says, all these dimensions exist at once, and even within your system, but your consciousness cannot perceive them.
And that brings us to the creepiest part of session 258, at least for me.
I know where you go with this.
If all these stations are playing at once in the same room, we are not the only ones in the room.
We have neighbors, very close neighbors.
Invisible neighbors. Let's talk about the one-way mirror concept he brings up.
Seth is very explicit about this, and it's chilling. He says, other systems exist within the same space occupied by your own. And then he adds, the inhabitants of some of these systems can perceive you. All of these inhabitants cannot perceive you, however.
Wait, let's break that down. Some of them can see us, but we generally cannot see them. Why is there an asymmetry there?
It goes right back to that phrase, capacity of consciousness. If their capacity is wider or higher than ours, their awareness encompasses our reality plus their own. Since our capacity is narrower, we only perceive our own sandbox.
It's like an adult watching a child play. The adult completely understands the child's game with the toy cars, but the child has absolutely no concept of the adult's tax returns.
That's a perfect analogy. We are the toddlers in the sandbox. We think the sandbox is the entire universe. But there are entities walking right past the sandbox, watching us build our little castles, and we are completely oblivious to them.
Seth also mentions survival personalities. Is this his clinical term for ghosts?
Effectively, yes. But notice how he completely strips away the gothic horror elements of it. He replaces the spooky folklore with straightforward physics. He describes them as entities that are existing in a system that temporarily overlaps ours.
He specifically says they're moving away from our system.
Right. Think of it like a radio signal that is slowly fading out. When a personality dies, according to Seth's framework, they don't just instantly teleport to some cloudy heaven, they shift systems.
But that shift isn't instantaneous.
Not always. It takes time. Or rather, it takes a change in focus. So for a little while, they are caught in the static zone between stations. They are bleeding through.
So a ghost isn't necessarily a tormented soul trapped by a curse in an old mansion. It's just signal interference.
It's a double exposure. You know in old film photography, when you forgot to wind the film forward, you took a picture and you got two entirely different images layered on top of each other?
Yes, exactly.
That is what a haunting is. It's two different time streams or reality systems overlapping because one of them hasn't fully wound forward to the next frame yet.
That makes it so much less scary and so much more technical.
It does. It implies that ghosts are mostly just people who are really bad at leaving a party. They've grabbed their coat, but they're just lingering in the doorway talking for another hour.
I love that. But you know, Seth doesn't just explain this to us. He actually takes a pretty direct shot at our human ability to even understand what he's saying, doesn't he? He insults our math.
Oh, he absolutely roasts our mathematics. He says, your idea of mathematics is extremely limited. He calls the entire field a very slim area.
I'm sure mathematicians listening are writing angry emails to us right now.
You should hear him out first. His point is valid. He argues that our human math is entirely based on our physical, three-dimensional logic. We can build a mathematical model of a fourth-dimensional cube.
A tesseract.
Right? We can map its coordinates. We can draw it. But Seth says we cannot conceive of a, quote, fourth-dimensional thinking process.
What is the real difference between mapping the shape and the thinking process?
The shape is static. It's an object. The thinking process is dynamic consciousness. A fourth-dimensional mind wouldn't think linearly the way we do. It wouldn't be A causes B and B causes C.
How would it think, then?
It would handle multiple divergent streams of I or identity simultaneously. And this leads into what I think is the most fascinating part of this session regarding the evolution of the soul. Seth talks about the inner self.
And he compares us to kindergartners again?
He really does. He says the primary reason we are currently locked into this specific physical reality with one body and one single ego is because we are in basic training. We are learning how to handle focus.
Learning to handle just one ego at a time.
Exactly. He says that in higher dimensions, the personality has to deal with a much larger number of perceptions while still maintaining its identity. The inner self manipulates reality in many dimensions until it can handle many, not just one, of its own egos at any given time.
Okay, my brain is cramping up again. Multiple egos, functioning at the exact same time.
Think of it like a video game. You are the player. You're sitting on your couch, holding the controller. On the TV screen, you have an avatar. Let's say it's Mario. Mario has a specific goal. He has enemies. He has a very simplistic personality. You, the player, are entirely focused on Mario.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now imagine you're playing Mario and you're also playing Call of Duty and The Sims and Elden Ring and Minecraft, all on 5 different screens in front of you, all at the exact same time, with one controller.
I would die in all of them immediately.
Exactly. Because your consciousness is not developed enough to hold that much focus simultaneously. You would crash. You would forget which character you were in which moment. You try to jump on a Goomba in Call of Duty and you try to shoot a gun in The Sims.
It would be total chaos, complete fragmentation.
That is precisely why we are here, according to Seth. We are learning to play one single game. We have to master the I of this one life first. We have to learn to be a stable self in a single linear time stream. Once we master that level of focus, then we get to level up to the 4th dimension where we play multiple games at once.
So the inner self is essentially the ultimate gamer.
That is the ultimate goal. To become a multidimensional consciousness that can fragment itself into a dozen different physical lives, live them all fully, feel all the pain and joy, but never once lose the central I that knows it is all of them combined.
That is actually incredibly inspiring. It totally reframes all the daily struggles of life. It's not a punishment, it's weightlifting for the soul.
It's building the psychological structure for what comes next. It's resistance training for your consciousness.
Okay, so that is the profound theory side of things. And honestly, if the session ended right there, it would be a brilliant philosophical lecture. But it doesn't end there.
No. Then comes the envelope.
And the magic trick of the night.
And it is so crucial that they do this part, because Seth can lecture about 4th dimensional physics all day long. But unless he can actually prove that he can see something that Jane's physical eyes cannot, it's just creative writing.
Talk is cheap. Enter the 53rd envelope experiment.
Right. So this is the second half of that same night, same room, same people. Jane goes back into a trance state. But this time, instead of lecturing on the cosmos, she has to guess what is hidden inside a sealed double envelope that Rob has prepared beforehand.
And Rob, being the incredibly diligent researcher that he is, pulled a bit of a fast one here.
He really did, and this is such a crucial detail for the skeptics listening. Rob reused a target object. In the previous session, session 257, he had used a specific piece of paper. It was the top half of a chapter from a book Jane was writing about dreams.
Okay.
For this session, session 258, he put that exact same piece of paper back into a new sealed envelope.
Why do that? Just to see if Seth would repeat himself?
To check for consistency and validity. If Seth is just spouting random words and hoping for a hit, the data will be completely different from the night before. But if he is actually perceiving the physical object, the data should strongly overlap with the previous session, even if he describes it from a new angle.
Oh.
It's a brilliant control test.
It's very smart. So Jane, speaking as Seth, holds the sealed envelope up to her forehead, and one of the very first things she says is the famous Mastodon line.
This is such a classic moment in the Seth material.
Mm-hmm.
Seth says, a connection with mass, or a word that sounds like Mastodon.
Mastodon, like the giant prehistoric woolly elephant.
Right, and you could just picture Rob sitting there, knowing exactly what is written on that paper inside the envelope, thinking to himself, okay, there is absolutely not a picture of a prehistoric elephant in here. We have totally failed.
But they hadn't failed at all.
No. And the explanation Seth gives for this later is an absolute masterclass in how telepathy and inner senses actually function. It's not like a clean fax machine transmission. It is highly associative.
So where did the giant elephant come from?
Okay, 2 distinct things happened at the exact same time. First, the phrase en masse, E-N space, M-A-S-S-E, was written in the text on the paper inside the envelope.
Okay, so he accurately picked up the word mass.
He did. But at the precise moment he picked up the concept of mass, he also telepathically picked up the physical presence of Jane's cat, who was quietly wandering around the living room.
The cat.
Yes. So the incoming raw data stream was the word mass, plus the concept of animal. The brain, which acts as a biological translator, tried to combine those 2 concepts to make sense of them. Mass, animal, massive animal, Mastodon.
That is hilarious. It's literally an autocorrect fail of the psychic mind.
It is. Seth himself calls it an obvious and rather amusing error. But think about what that error actually proves.
What do you mean?
It proves he isn't just x-raying the envelope and reading the physical ink like a barcode scanner. He is receiving pure concepts and filtering them through Jane's vocabulary and her immediate physical environment. It makes the whole process feel incredibly messy and real.
It is validating exactly because it's messy. If it was a perfect word-for-word dictation, I'd be highly suspicious of fraud.
Exactly. The imperfections are the proof of the mechanism. But, setting the elephant aside, he also got a series of direct hits that are very hard for any skeptic to explain away. Let's look at the hit list.
Okay, let's go through them. First one. Seth sensed a connection with a trial, or something tried.
On the paper inside, the word try appears twice, and the text itself is literally discussing experiments or trials that the reader should perform with their own dreams. That's a solid conceptual hit.
Next hit. Seth gave the numbers 4 and 7.
He literally just said 4, 7. Rob checks his notes later. This specific page of the manuscript was typed by Jane on April 7th, 4/7.
Wait, but the date wasn't actually written on the piece of paper inside the envelope, was it?
No, it wasn't. The date was part of the history of the object. This is psychometry in action.
Yeah.
Seth isn't just reading the ink, he's reading the energetic imprint of when the object was physically created in time.
That is wild. He's reading the metadata of the paper. Okay, next one. Seth saw shapes that are stacked, like jungle gyms.
This is a direct visual hit. The text on the page described a specific playground from Jane's childhood. And specifically, it evokes jungle gyms, which are literally those stacked square cubes of metal bars.
Visual matching. Perfect. Okay, here's the one that gave me literal goosebumps when I read the transcript. The border black connection.
Oh, this is the detective work I absolutely love, Seth says. A border, perhaps in black.
So Rob looks at the paper. Is there a black border printed on it?
No, it's just a standard blank type page. No border whatsoever.
So a miss, then.
A casual skeptic would immediately say miss and walk away. But Rob digs deeper. He asks himself, where does the text on this page lead? The text is about a specific playground from Jane's youth. That exact playground was located directly across the street from a Catholic school and a rectory.
Okay, I see the thread starting to form.
Who lived in that rectory? A priest named Father Ryan. Jane knew him very well. She used to talk to him for hours in a classroom that directly overlooked that specific playground.
And Father Ryan had just recently died, right?
Yes. And Jane had just received a mass card, a prayer card in the mail notifying her of his death. And what was printed on that card?
Let me guess. A black border.
A very heavy, distinct black border.
So let me trace this chain of association. Seth touches the paper in the envelope. The paper holds the energetic memory of the concept playground. The playground is linked by emotional association to Father Ryan. Father Ryan is linked to the recent death notice, and the death notice has the black border.
It's 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, but for psychic data.
That is insane.
It's associative thinking. That explains that the inner senses work like a giant spider web. You pull on one single thread, the paper, and it vibrates the entire connected web. The black border was vibrating on that web because it was intensely emotionally connected to the location described in the text.
That implies something massive about memory. It implies that our memories aren't just stored in our physical brains. They are stored where?
In the network of reality itself, we associate places with people and people with objects. Seth is essentially just surfing those associations outside of space and time.
This perfectly explains the Mastodon thing, too. It's all just association. Mass plus animal equals Mastodon. Playground plus priest equals black border.
Exactly. It shows a highly consistent mechanism at work. It's not random guessing. It's navigating a real, structured map of consciousness.
And did the data actually match the previous session? You said earlier this was a control test.
It absolutely did. In session 257, the night before, Seth mentioned markings and dates and the month of April. In session 258, he gets 4 and 7.
Yeah.
It's the exact same data, just brought into deeper, sharper resolution. It validates that there is a static reality to the object he is perceiving.
It's just incredible. We have this one single session that starts with a grand lecture on stars are illusions and ends with, your cat made me say Mastodon.
And yet, conceptually, they fit together perfectly.
How so? How do you synthesize those two completely different halves for the listener?
The synthesis is simply this: permeability. The lecture on the stars tells us that the physical world is just a surface, a translation, a projection. The experiment with the envelope proves that consciousness can look behind that projection.
We can read the underlying code of reality.
Yes. If matter is just a translation, then consciousness can bypass the translation entirely. Seth bypassed the physical envelope. He bypassed linear time to see the creation date of 4/7. He bypassed physical space to see the black border on a card located somewhere else in the house. He is demonstrating the very thing he lectured about in the first half. He is actively showing us what a fourth-dimensional thinking process looks like in real time.
It looks like seeing the hidden connections between everything all at once.
Exactly. It means we aren't isolated, lonely biological machines. We are active parts of a vast, interconnected web where our thoughts, the objects on our desks, and the stars in the sky are all woven together.
That is a lot to take in on a morning commute or a jog. but it definitely makes the world feel so much larger.
And significantly less lonely.
Truly. Now, before we let you go to ponder your own multidimensional existence, we have to give credit where it is absolutely due. This deep dive is based on the Seth Material, which is published by the New Awareness Network.
And we are really just scratching the surface here today. If you found this even slightly mind-bending, you really owe it to yourself to go directly to the source material.
We strongly encourage you to study the Seth Material books directly. You can find them at the New Awareness Network website and their bookstore at sethcenter.com/the-early-sessions. Go there, get the books, read the raw transcripts for yourself. It is a journey that is entirely worth taking.
It will completely change how you look at the night sky.
And your cat.
Oh, definitely your cat.
So, here is the final thought I want to leave you with tonight. We talked about stars just being the bottom footprint of a reality we can't fully see. We talked about ghosts being neighbors who are just slowly moving away from our frequency. We talked about the empty space in your room being crowded with invisible, overlapping systems.
It's getting very crowded in here.
So take a look around the room you are sitting in right now. It looks empty. It looks quiet. But if Seth is right, you are currently sitting in the middle of a bustling, busy intersection of multiple dimensions. So the question you have to ask yourself is, who or what is sitting in the chair right next to you right now that you just haven't tuned your frequency into yet?
Don't answer that.
Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you in the next dimension.
Good night, everyone.